Adam Francis, conceited young man, decided to marry a rich old woman in order to con her out of her money. However, he underestimated the old lady and could not believe the life lessons she gave him. Adam was a 23-year-old man who despised working. He was supported by his parents for as long as possible, but the couple, seeing that their son would stay there forever if they let him, forced the young man to get a job and leave home. Due to their pressure, Adam got a job in a coffee shop, where he was always late and often rude to the customers. Deep down, the man was unhappy and despised his life because he yearned for money to buy expensive clothes and visit luxurious places, but his pockets were always empty. Moreover, the young man did not like to spend the little money he received, preferring to have someone else pay his bills whenever possible. But despite his physical attractiveness, he rarely found a woman who was willing to do this for him. In general, Adam led a routine life, going from home to work and back again. Everything changed, however, thanks to an unexpected customer in his coffee shop. He was used to seeing regular people who picked up a cup of coffee and hurried off to their next destination. But this customer was different. A high-end car parked in front of the place, and the driver got out to open the back door, allowing his boss to pass. A woman with white hair and wrinkles on her skin walked out, clearly not afraid to flaunt her age. She was well dressed and walked straight to the coffee shop, where she waited in line for her turn. Adam was used to serving one customer after another without even looking into their faces. But by some fluke of fate, this time, he looked forward and his gaze was drawn to the sophisticated lady. Adam quickly realized, based on her clothes and the security guards accompanying her, that this was no ordinary customer. Then his posture changed. A fake and automatic smile spread across his face, followed by a sentence spoken with great kindness. "Hello, can I help you this fine afternoon?" The lady simply replied she wanted a simple espresso for herself and tea for her driver. Adam was unrecognizable as he processed everything immediately and prepared the order himself, as he had never done his job so masterfully before. While delivering the hot drinks, the young man made a small compliment to the lady. He didn't stop there either. "You know, I see you're clearly a businesswoman, and I'm wondering if you could give me a shot. I'll take any position that will help me advance my career. I don't want to limit myself here." Adam said this while staring deeply into the woman's eyes. She hadn't expected this when she ordered a simple cup of coffee, but she realized he seemed committed and that it wouldn't hurt to give him a chance. The lady carefully opened her purse, took out a business card, handed it to the young man, and walked away. The card bore her name and business contact info, and when Adam saw that he had landed an opportunity, he was ecstatic and, for the first time in years, hopeful for the future. The following morning, Adam set out to call the number he had received. "How can I help you?" "Miss Judy's office," the voice on the other end of the line said. The young man told his story, and the secretary confirmed that it had been communicated to her and that she was waiting for his call. He accepted a job interview the following day at 4 p.m., despite not knowing what the position entailed. Surprisingly, Adam was punctual and arrived before the office even opened. He also managed to get Miss Judy, the owner of the office and the same person who attended the coffee shop, to hear him out. She normally would not conduct the interviews, but the young man was so insistent that she decided to make an exception. The truth is that Adam captivated her not because of his good looks, but because of his communication style and the extent to which he focused on his goals. Furthermore, he dressed well and appeared to act like a true gentleman in any environment or situation. Miss Judy had no doubt that he would be hired and directed to the sales department of her office, being responsible for going door to door to large companies offering their products. The elderly lady was an accomplished boss who oversaw one of the largest sports equipment retail chains in the country. Despite this, she had no interest in sports, let alone business, until she took it up 13 years ago when her husband, the founder, died, leaving Miss Judy his entire empire. Despite her lack of experience and amateurism in business, the company was never better, leading everyone to believe that the old lady had a natural talent for it. Adam didn't know the entire story, but he deduced it from the old photos on Mrs. Judy's wall of a gentleman who appeared to be her age. He also noticed that she didn't have a wedding ring on her finger, and despite the fact that she was well cared for, he assumed she was over 70. As a result, he decided to try to seduce the old woman and make her fall in love with him. He imagined she wouldn't live much longer due to her wrinkles and age. In this manner, he could marry her, wait a few years until her death, and inherit her large inheritance and company. The young man didn't feel bad about doing this to the sweet woman who reached out her hand to help him. He didn't mind lying and manipulating for a few years because the end result would be great, and that was all the narcissistic man cared about: status and money. and the plan appeared to be working. Adam had never worked so hard in his life, and despite having no previous work experience, he worked as a salesman and brought in 2 great clients, surprising everyone, including Miss Judy. The young man was able to manipulate everyone around him and convince them to do exactly what he wanted with his sweet and polite demeanor. Miss Judy would profit handsomely from the contracts he had entered into, so the old woman decided to reward him by taking him to dinner at one of the best restaurants in town to encourage him to keep up the good work. And it was at this dinner that the young man performed admirably. Adam seduced and complimented the lady all night, and it didn't take long for the lady to succumb to the handsome young man's charms and return his flirtations. During the meal, the two talked a lot, he lying about a false background, and she telling about the founding of her company with her late husband and all their adventures around the world. After a few weeks of going out and getting to know each other, the young man decided to take a chance and go for all or nothing. Adam picked the right time to propose to his boss. Miss Judy's expression was one of astonishment and surprise. Despite the fact that they went out frequently, he was always respectful and never tried to kiss her, so a proposal was unexpected. She tried to argue that it would be absurd for a boss to date an employee, but Adam and his strong persuasion skills managed to elicit a yes as a final answer. The old lady was surprised that a guy like that wanted to be with an old lady like her, but she was so happy that she didn't even think about it. She just accepted the request and celebrated into the night. After this, Adam knew that his plan was going as planned. He would, however, have to exercise extreme caution and avoid revealing his true intentions. He devoted himself to his courtship, taking the lady to places she had no idea existed, introducing her to places he had never seen before in the city, and tourist spots he had always wanted to visit but had never had the money to do so. With such love and concern for the elderly lady, it was only a matter of time before Miss Judy fell head over heels in love with Adam. It was impossible for her not to feel more alive whenever she was around him, experiencing new things, meeting incredible people, and rediscovering the true meaning of life. Whether she liked it or not, her late husband had always been much more focused on his business than on his family. Although he was always in her company, he was not the most caring husband and chose not to have children, having a vasectomy when he was younger to avoid trouble in the future and leaving Miss Judy without heirs. And after his death, the elderly woman became even more lonely and reclusive, living solely for business. The woman then decided to do something unusual. She rented the best penthouse in town for the weekend and invited Adam, but she didn't say what the occasion was. The young man was taken aback when he arrived at the hotel by helicopter. He had never flown before and had no idea what awaited him. Miss Judy, who was waiting for him, called him in, and after a few minutes, she made the most unusual decision of her life. She proposed to Adam on the hotel balcony. The young man was surprised, but quickly responded yes, leaving Miss Judy extremely happy and with tears in her eyes. Adam had no idea his plan would work so well that she would ask him to marry her. Despite her joy, she was disturbed by his treatment of the hotel employee who knocked on the door to welcome her. She thought it was just her perception, and he wasn't rude at all, but it triggered a warning in her mind, making her more alert to Adam's next moves. What she hadn't realized was how much money he spent on frivolous items every week. Since he started dating Miss Judy, he has been wearing designer clothes and watches that closely resembles jewelry. The young man was always walking and acting like a true millionaire, and it appeared that adjusting to the lavish lifestyle was simple. On the contrary, anyone looking in would think Adam was born and raised in this way. This was all imperceptible to the old lady because she did not check her bank account or card statements on a daily basis. But whenever the old lady's bank manager noticed the unusual transactions, he called her every time to confirm the situation and ensure that everything was all right. Judy was born poor in a small, humble village in the country's interior, despite having been very wealthy for many decades. She had been a hard worker since childhood, working in a variety of professions before her late husband's company became successful. In fact, she was the main breadwinner during the man's attempts to make his business a reality, as the company had been nothing more than a plan on paper for years. She kept working and giving him a portion of her salary to invest in his dream because she knew he could make it work with such determination. That is exactly what he did. After a few years, the company began to turn a profit, and his wife stopped working and became the majority shareholder. And following her husband's tragic death, she became the sole owner of the entire empire. But the old woman's struggle made her never care about how much money she had. She only invested in her own business and never cared about how many houses, cars, and jewelry she could own, limiting herself to basic comfort and only owning what she needed. And luxuries like renting an expensive hotel and a helicopter to pick up Adam were extremely rare, if not unique. Nonetheless, the young man's wedding to Judy was low-key, with no big party or anything of the sort, just a small dinner at her house. The bank manager called her only to see if everything was alright and if she had made those expensive purchases, because he had never seen so much money leave the account as he was seeing now. Mrs. Judy began to question and become suspicious of her current husband's true intentions at this point. Already wary of long cell phone calls and spending hours, if not days, away from home, the elderly woman became concerned that he was only interested in her money. Was the old lady's marriage to the young man a mistake? Miss Judy decided to contact a private detective friend of hers, who watched the man for a few weeks and photographed his every move in an attempt to move on with her life and put an end to her anguish. The humble woman couldn't believe her eyes when she received the detective's final report. Adam had been transferred to another branch of the company a few months ago to supervise other managers and employees due to his demonstrated competence, but the truth was that he had not shown up at his job for weeks. The man was meeting another woman and going to parties and restaurants almost every week while leaving the old lady's house every day and saying he was going to work. In short, he was constantly cheating on Mrs. Judy, and he lavished his mistress with extravagant gifts purchased with his fortune and the company's corporate card. The tears streaming down the old woman's cheeks paled in comparison to her expression of dismay when she saw all those pictures and bank transfers. All of her trust had been broken, and the result of trying to live again had been a disaster, leaving her feeling more used and cheated than she had ever felt in her life. How could he have done this to me? How could he claim to love me one moment and then abandon me to cheat on me with a younger woman the next? She reflected on how naive she had been, how blinded she had been by the passion and illusion of a handsome young boy. Despite the sadness of continuing on with her life, she knew it couldn't last, and she immediately began to plan a way to give the conceited and lying Adam a real shock, promising herself that it wouldn't stay that way. Her first move was to block all of her personal credit cards that were in the boy's possession, as well as to terminate his contract with the company immediately, but without warning him. And after this, the man's first attempt to use his credit card to pay for dinner with his mistress was denied. Incredulous at the situation, he joked that it was an operator error and that this always happened as a result of machine errors, blaming the restaurant employee and handing him another card. After 3 attempts, the atmosphere was heavy with embarrassment and tension. "I'm sure this is due to some incompetence on your part. You know, if you worked for my company, you'd be out of a job right now," Adam said to the humble and friendly waiter, who only apologized and said he'd be right back. When he returned, he brought with him the manager of the establishment, who asked if the man had any cash to pay, as his cards were clearly in trouble. The young man tried to call his wife, Mrs. Judy, but she did not answer her cell phone, leaving the young man alone in the situation. After the threat of calling the cops and spending the night in jail, Adam agreed to leave his documents and cell phone with the manager agreed to avoid further embarrassment in the crowded restaurant. The young man was enraged. He had no idea what had happened, but his plan was still working perfectly and going exactly as he had planned, so he did his best to follow through and resolve the situation. When he got home, he questioned his wife about what had happened and why the missed calls. She denied knowing the reason, claiming it was a bank issue that she would call him the next day to resolve. Adam tried to hide his rage, but it was too much for him. Mrs. Judy could then see the young man for who he truly was, without the filter that she had placed on him. She saw that he was only concerned with status and money, and she was determined to hold him accountable for all of his lies and betrayals. She went to the bank the next day, but not to resolve the problem with her credit card, but to change her marriage contract and her inheritance. With no money and her family already deceased, everyone had always wondered where that money and all the woman's business dealings would end up, which was now a secret between her lawyer, and her bank manager. Unfortunately, her vengeful plan was thwarted by a sudden death. Only a few of the closest employees were aware, but Judy had been battling cancer for about 3 years and, for better or worse, she knew her days were numbered and her end was near. The elderly woman left for the other side, sad and feeling betrayed by the last person she trusted. But knowing she was on the verge of saying goodbye forever, she left a letter with her faithful driver, saying her final goodbye and her final assignments to him. Adam began to act like a depressed widower in the aftermath of his wife's death, wearing an expensive black suit and dark glasses. He concealed the absence of tears in his eyes. The will was read during his wake. It had been requested in Mrs. Judy's letter. The place was packed with company employees and shareholders who were worried about the company's future. The text began by thanking everyone for their presence and stating that at least now she would have true happiness, meeting her late husband on the other plane and being able to be together for the rest of eternity, making Adam feel uneasy as everyone stared at him. Her company, on the other hand, would be divided equally among the current shareholders, mentioning how they had always helped the old woman and how, thanks to the good guidelines and decisions made by the board, she left for the afterlife with her company more powerful and stronger than ever. In this way, she has faith that they will. In terms of the fortune, it was revealed that the amounts in the old woman's account were greater than everyone had assumed. Despite people's belief in her innocence and lack of knowledge, she was a tremendous investor for many years, making enormous profits from the holdings and sales of other companies she helped set up. It was to establish an NGO that would be in charge of sheltering street children, not only paying for their stay, food, and clothing until they reached the age of 18, but also for their education at prestigious colleges and a guaranteed position in one of her companies. As the reading progressed, Adam's expression of hatred and anger from the day before was etched on his face once more. Angry at not receiving any share of the company or the fortune, he awaited the fate of the properties and cars, which are worth far more than he could ever spend in his entire life. To his surprise, all of these would be sold, with all proceeds going to existing charities. When the will finally mentions Adam, a big thank you begins. The late Mrs. Judy expresses her gratitude for the man at the end of her life, saying that because of him, she had incredible and unusual experiences, saw beautiful places, and had contact with things and people she didn't even know existed. Miss Judy also stated that she believed she had made the man very happy and had left him one of the most important items she could leave. He was given a key, which he was to take to a vault in the country's most renowned bank, according to the will. Adam smiled cynically, realizing that he would soon own a collection of jewelry or real estate deeds. In a final tribute to Judy, all the guests applauded, with Adam receiving the lion's share of her inheritance. After a few days had passed, Adam decided to go to the bank to check on his long-awaited inheritance. The manager greeted him and told him that everyone was expecting him. The young man was led to the vault on the most secure floor of the building, and the employees made him comfortable there as a privacy measure before leaving, and asking him to call them when he was ready to leave. With such anxiety, Adam rushed to open the steel safe, expecting to find diamonds and other jewels, but what he found inside nearly knocked him over. There was a glass of espresso inside the safe, the same one Adam had served Miss Judy the day they met. The drink was already cold and accompanied by a mere note that read, "I hope you enjoy the bitter taste. With love, your late wife." The young man immediately understood the message. She was well aware of his plan all along. She had always known. She had left that cup of coffee as a final joke for Adam, a way for him to understand everything he had done, all his lies and betrayals, which had resulted in nothing more than frustration and a coffee without sugar. The boy couldn't believe it. He was back where he started, with no money and no job. He was devastated. He cried and screamed at the same time because he didn't know what else to do now that everyone had realized his farce. After this humiliation, he became well known throughout the town, and he never achieved the social ascension he desired. Not even the coffee shop where he worked wanted him back. Mrs. Judy died happy, knowing she had already found her soulmate, her late husband, and that Adam was just a gold digger who didn't get what he wanted in the end. If you like this video, please leave a like, and this other story that is appearing on the screen will most likely move you as well. Have a wonderful day and see you in the next video.